Hi there, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and I'm just going to give my commentary now on the recent events going on in Congress. As all of you know, very shortly the next Congress will go into session, and this Congress will see the reappearance of a Republican majority in the House of Representatives. And it has recently been brought to everyone's attention that the first order of business under the new Congress, and this is of little surprise to me or to anybody else who's been paying attention, will be the repeal of Obamacare. Now, this approach has within it a certain number of blessings that I think a lot of people aren't even beginning to consider. And the consideration basically goes around the press conference that was actually recently done, in which we had all of the dancing lunatics of the Democratic leadership in the House of Representatives basically stating that this whole repealing process was nothing more than kabuki theater for the purpose of distracting people away from the real issues. This was particularly the assertion of Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, aka the disgruntled feminist lunatic. Suffice to say, her argument is that we need to be focusing on jobs. And maybe to a small extent I agree with her. We do need to focus on jobs. And the way that we do that is by keeping the government out of the entire concept of jobs. Let me just put it to you this way, ladies and gentlemen. If it ultimately comes to all of this effort to repeal Obamacare is simply nothing more than kabuki theater, and it's actually the courts that end up getting rid of this insane fit of spending, it will still be of profit to us because Congress will be doing what it does best. Absolutely nothing. I would rather pay my tax dollars to see Congress engage in kabuki theater than to see what they've been doing for the past 4 years, let alone all of the other sessions since before them. Leave us not forget that Congress is what gave us the Federal Reserve Bank. Congress is what gave us the graduated income tax. Congress is what has allowed the woefully misinterpreted interstate commerce to balloon into the tyrannical, anarchaic standard for government expansion that it has become. All of this automatically falls on the dereliction of Congress to do what it is actually constitutionally afforded to do and permitted to do. There are limits that are placed upon what Congress can do, just like there are limits placed on what the presidency can do. And just as nowadays everybody has this woefully deluded idea of the benevolent dictator in the presidency and are giving all sorts of latitude to the messianic one, Barack Obama, to do whatever the hell he wants to via executive orders, there also seems to be this mindset that Congress is not doing their job unless they're completely rewriting our tax code every year and ballooning the budget by 10 or 15 percentage points each year. This is utter insanity. Now, at best, what's probably going to go down in Congress will only stave off the coming collapse by maybe a couple of years. Maybe give us a brief respite and a chance to heal a little bit before we make the ultimate plunge and we have to rebuild this thing from the ground up. But nonetheless, I prefer grace periods to impending disasters tomorrow. Let's just put it that way. And that's the reason why I elected to vote Republican in the last election. I would prefer to see Armageddon 3 years from now as opposed to seeing it tomorrow. But now I'm just going to give my commentary with regards to the insanity that I just beheld at this Democratic press conference. Obviously, the antics of Representative Schultz, they go without saying. But let me just take a little time to reflect upon that of Representative DeLauro. I have no idea how the heck this woman can go around and be in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church, which claims to be pro-life, amongst other things, and simply allowing this woman to go into her church and receive the Eucharist and receive the sacrament of confession, given all of the insane things that she says. She looks like a witch doctor up there on stage, channeling the spirits. Historically, even though they've been grossly and horribly wrong on a number of things, Rome has at least had the good sense to keep their fanatical mystics under their boot and out of the public eye. And the solution to the Representative Delaro problem is a very simple one. She needs to be set up in a nice little padded cell in the basement of the Vatican right next to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's the only way you're going to solve that problem. I mean, I cannot even put into logical terms what I just beheld with that woman basically channeling sense and then turning it into nonsense, channeling the spirits. I mean, I didn't know whether I was watching a congresswoman of the United States or if I was watching a voodoo priestess. I mean, she makes Sarah Palin look like Albert Einstein. And that's pretty pathetic. And then, of course, there's Nancy Pelosi. I mean, why have one insane Roman Catholic woman when you can get two for twice the price? Suffice to say, Miss Formaldehyde Face was actually the second most sane person in the bunch. The sanest person being the backwater Baptist from Maryland, Steny Hoyer, who is at least capable of actually citing facts, even though he presents them in a horribly dishonest fashion. He talks about Republican policy of deficits, and then in the same sentence he also talks about the only time period in which we ever had surpluses was during a Democrat presidency and a Republican Congress. And he leaves out the fact that all of those decades in the mid-20th century where we had horrid deficits were under complete Democratic control. Just like the past 2 years have been pretty much the same story. There is no way to even begin to fathom all of the deficits that are going to be created by all of the crap that was ramrodded through the Congress in the past 2 years. And that's the reason why, God willing, some of this fat will be trimmed from some of these bills at the very least. I mean, I'm hoping for an out-and-out repeal and definitely a complete repudiation of this entire concept of people being on their parents' health insurance until they're 26 years old. All right. My father worked for the government, the federal government, for many decades. He retired a little bit early, but he was in there for about 98% of what would be considered a full term before being eligible for full retirement. And I was on his health care plan until I was 22 years old. And let me tell you, that was far too long. Because right when I turned 22, I had to figure into an already shoestring budget how to cope with getting my own insurance. And the truth is I went without insurance for a few months, and then I finally caved in and got a low-level HMO program under Aetna, which I am still currently under, although I may be switching in the near future since the premiums have been raised, mostly because of the passage of Obamacare. Suffice to say, health insurance is, in my opinion, one of the biggest scams out there, particularly as it pertains to young people. And there are two things that are horrible about this bill. Number one, it teaches people to be on it by keeping them on it until they're 26 years old. And number two, it forces them to buy it on their own immediately afterwards. You're basically being compelled to do something with a certain amount of your income. You're foregoing any concept of property rights. Let's face it, we don't have property rights in this country. What is it that people fear whenever they reach a higher pay grade and they go up into the next income tax bracket and they start to live a little more comfortably? I'll tell you what they're afraid of. They're afraid that Uncle Sam is just going to march right in there jolly on the spot and take it and all and leave them with nothing. And believe me, they can do that if they wanted to. And in many cases, in different countries, that is exactly what's being done. People's entire private retirement plans are being nationalized in order to shore up corrupt public retirement plans that are already bankrupt. In essence, money is being confiscated and it's being poured down the toilet. That is the nature of the statist state, ladies and gentlemen. It is a state where all real wealth is confiscated and fake fiat wealth is redistributed to everybody so that they can make do with meager means, so to speak, modest means. The trees are all kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw, according to the famous Rush song, and that's true. The only way to keep the trees equal is by chopping down the bigger ones until they're the exact same size as the smaller ones. So I'm just going to conclude this by saying the following. If at this point in time you are still harboring any level of loyalty to the Democratic Party, you're insane. Even if it's from the standpoint of being a fake third-party person, supporting the Green Party, but voting Democrat whenever the actual votes come up. Not to say that if you're an established party person in general that you're thinking critically, but at least you're thinking to some extent if you're thinking of a government that's a little bit smaller. Because that which governs best always governs least. And if you have any doubt of this, just read the history of the past 100 years and look at all of the things that have happened under big governments. World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. These were all the ideas of big governments and the governing type that are drawn to big government. Take from it what you will. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.